So maybe we can kind of brush up towards our topic, which is talking a few church history stories that maybe spooky or weird or coincidental. I was reading a sci-fi story with the great Katie Room from periopsispress.com, and they talked about the Munster Rebellion. I was like, oh, this was the last time that Europe like rejected communism, and hopefully one day soon we'll remember the Great Rebellion and what we did to communist of the just recently Reformation for them. So I was like, oh, I need to get Troy on to talk about this. But so if everything's forgotten, if we cannot remember our own great grandparents, why is church history even important for us? I mean, is it just Billy Graham forward for Americans? Is it just the Reformation forward for the crazy Calvinists and maybe Europe, but also we're kind of rejecting everything for the Enlightenment period even more? Why care? What's in it for me? And why tune in to the show to listen to sermons that were preached to people long forgotten as well?
Well, you see, I always say like this because I have to teach high schoolers, and they ask, very similar questions. Why do I care about history? And I say, well, if you don't know where you're going, you don't, or if you don't know where you come from, you won't know where you're going.
That's right.
And if you don't understand how you got to this place in history, you will be led anywhere that this world would like to lead you. There's a reason that when Marxists started to infiltrate a country or their university system, they started with the English department, the language department, or history and the history departments, because math, sciences, those things can be corrupted later. But if people can speak freely, they're not going to get anywhere with Marxism. And if people don't know a better history than the one you give them, you're not going to get anywhere. If it's important to the Marxists to rewrite a country, rename everything, and retell a story of the history, then it should probably be important for us to know what the true history of this world is. And the thing is, the church has an amazing history full of wonderful people who did awesome things for God. And there are some negative things too that we can learn from as warning, cautionary tales that we don't want to repeat. But if we so often live in the moment right now as if these are the only things that matter, and yet I find that what we're going through right now, you might be going through a pretty tough situation in life, but it's probably nothing compared to the Black Plague when it hit Europe, or probably nothing compared to the Civil War, or some of the confusing persecutions throughout history. Just so many different things. We can learn so much about being bold in our faith by looking back and seeing what did people do back then. A very recent sermon I have that I just kind of am putting together, it was not even out yet, but it's by a man named Cyprian, and he was in a city that was under war. It was under persecution. It was under a famine and a plague all at the same time. And he was preaching to the crowd, and he said to the people there, he said, I know one of the things people here are worried about is that during this wave of persecution, you will get passed over and won't be martyred for Christ. And you're worried that that will impact your relationship with God. You're worried that you will miss out on that glorious opportunity. And he said, you know what? Don't worry. God sees your heart. He knows you're willing to do it. If you don't get picked up and martyred, just know that God knows you wanted to, and he's going to accept that too. And I go, man, that sounds completely different than the church today, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I cannot imagine if those things were all happening today, the church would go, oh, don't worry, you'll get your chance to get martyred. No way. That's not what we would do. And it's convicting and challenging to hear people like that and to recognize how far we have fallen from where we once were and what we prioritize now. And so I think we can learn so very much from these people. And remember, they're brothers in Christ. Hebrews 11 tells us of this great hall of faith. And then Hebrews 12:1 says that, because of this great cloud of witnesses, go and live in a Christ-like manner. And I don't think that the great cloud of witnesses stopped then, even though we don't have, biblical heroes of faith anymore. We have a church that has been going for 2,000 years that God has been doing great things through. And when we learn what he's been doing through his people, it helps us to do a better job to follow him as his people. And so I think there are unbelievable plethoras of reasons. And why should you listen to their old sermons? Because they're full of wisdom. You would think that these old sermons written to people dealing with the Pope or dealing with Roman Empire, you would think that has nothing to do with your life. But I always tell people, if I could show you in my inbox how many times the word relevant has been sent to me. That sermon was just what I needed this week. Man, I can't believe how relevant these sermons are from the past. You would change your perspective on it completely. These are great men of God. You don't have to worry about their church going down in a scandal. They've been dead for 200, 300, 500, 1,000 years. Their scandals are known. There's nothing new coming out. And you can rely on them for good biblical teaching. And you're going to find that they are relevant. Sermons are relevant. I think it's because even though they lived in different conditions than you and I do today, the truth doesn't change. And humans have been struggling with the same thing for 2,000, 4,000 since we've been on earth. And so good truth applied to the people, you can find that applicable to us today as much as they did back then.
Yeah. Yeah, the fact that that God establishes the world, and then we from his both his general and specific revelation form our Christian worldview. It's no wonder that we should be able to kind of link arms with these brothers and sisters who have the more the things change, the more they stay the same. There's just more technology out in the world, and you just realize that people tend to be people. I remember reading Gregory of Nazianzus. It was just a short sermon that he gave me, but I think he was blessing the people out in the field right before communion or baptism, something like that. And the translation at least made it seem like just someone full of love. And we think of these people, 300 or so years after the last apostle, are these, staunchy people in weird looking poses in frescoes or what have you. But the words that they spoke were loving and just, I don't want to use the R word immediately, but you feel the kind of the same thing that you would when you're surrounded by the people in the church service. If the forecast of the snow doesn't make you stay home because you might have to scrape off your car twice because of it. Yeah. But yeah.
No, it's true, and I feel like too as well. I'm glad that you said that, mentioned that aspect of it too, because so many people are, I love these great theologians, I love reading these great books, but before these guys were theologians, almost all of them were pastors, and sometimes we forget that the reason we read any of their books today is because they pastored their church well enough that people wanted to hear their opinions, usually on other things. And so that aspect of them, their love and heart for their people as shepherds, is why we care about the books and theology they wrote. If they didn't do that part well, I don't think we'd probably want to read their books. But so often we segment them as, that's a great brain right there, let me just pick the brain. It's like, no, you need to bring that heart with you. And I find that you can get that heart in their sermons.
And I think too, the sermons give you a specific point in that person's life as well, because they might not use as many jokes as we probably do in our sermons today, and I'm probably more guilty of it than anybody.
I remember one time somebody messaged me and said, "Hey, did people not tell jokes back then?" And I hadn't noticed it until that point, that I was like, you know what? Actually, there are not that many jokes. Occasionally, there really are a few. I've caught them where they're being witty, where they kind of say something a little silly. It doesn't quite it's not as direct as a joke as maybe ours are, but I'm like, okay, that he's being funny right here. But it's true. Like comparatively, this person told me they went to a Baptist seminary, Southern Baptist one. They were like, my professor told me we have to have like a joke every 3 minutes or we lose the audience. So imagine my surprise when all these sermons you keep sending out never have any jokes at all.
Yeah. Well, and I'm currently reading a biography on J. Gresham Mencken, and it's amazing to kind of I know his place in history, but the fact that he almost didn't become a minister, the fact that he wanted to do New Testament work but struggled with belief to the point for him, I think it was more like, am I being honest with everybody that I could possibly interact with, God, if he exists, myself, and then the people that I would preach to? Can I be honest and say that I truly believe this? And so it's interesting to see those moments. And then when he'll talk about a sermon that he preached, he says, I almost too briefly went over Romans 8:26a. And it's like, you did a whole sermon on just a fraction of a verse and, drilled down into it. And so you just have those moments where you kind of are input into their audience and experience not the mythic of the men and women, but kind of that moment. And so that's what I appreciate about these. I think John Gill was talking in remembrance of a bad storm that had blown through. And that was really impressive because we tend to have this maybe tying too much with, look at this moment in Scripture and we're going to tie it exactly into that. But the way that he was able to bring in the Jesus calming the storm and this remembrance of a time when a true gale force devastated this area is impressive, and it I think it humanizes is probably the wrong word, but it allows us to come alongside and just relate to it, for lack of my better word.
Yeah, I love that sermon. And you wouldn't believe the hassle that sermon. And there's a lot of sermons that I've had to put out that take a while to get recorded. When you recorded that sermon, I had edited that sermon over a year prior to that. And I sent it to multiple people and just nobody would read it. Like 2 or 3 different people just quit on it, didn't read it. And I was like, man, is it this sermon? So I was really happy when you finally did read it and sent it to me. I think we were actually getting ready I'm pretty sure we were getting ready to go to Cambodia at that time too. So it was really nice. I was like, oh, good. It's coming in. We needed that right now. So it was really helpful. And I thought it was a great sermon too. I was like, this is a really interesting thing by a really important Baptist theologian that would not be remembered. It all came together well. And the number of times that kind of thing has happened with one of our sermons where it comes together right at the last moment, or I've had sermons take 1 or 2 years to get out. And then when it came out the week of, someone's like, hey, that was the week I needed it. So I've become very much just like, Lord, if you're sending this sermon in right now, it's because that's the one people must need right now. So I trust the process.
Awesome.